Welcome to this Wheel and Anchor webinar on our trip, which will cross the Andes Mountains from Argentina to Chile. This trip is full of superlatives. Some of them, my most favorite travel experiences, are in the places that we'll visit here. First of all, starting off at Iguazu Falls, of course, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I've been to a lot of waterfalls around the world. This is the best one. And when I say best, they're all different, they all have their own magic to them. But in terms of the volume of water, the number of cascades coming down, this one is really cool. Then we head to Buenos Aires. This city is also one of my favorite cities in the world, certainly my favorite in South America. It has a vibrant soul. It's got the sizzling asado, the barbecues that you have in San Telmo. You can wander around the Caminito district of La Boca, which is famous for the tango dancing. uh, Buenos Aires has so much to it, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. Then we're off to Mendoza, Argentina. Mendoza is obviously the Argentina's capital of wine, and like many other wine-producing countries, excuse me, they keep the best ones for themselves, which is why it's important to visit, particularly if you are a wine lover. And from there, we experience some incredible vistas as we cross the pass into Chile. We'll be able to see, if it's a clear day, Mount Aconcagua, the highest one in the Andes, and we end up in Santiago, an exciting city itself, heading up Cerro San Cristobal, which is a hill in the middle of downtown that has great views over the city, and of course, the whole backdrop is the Andes Mountain. So much to see on this trip. Now, for those of you who participate in many of our webinars, you're welcome to skip ahead to the details, to the map, to the day-by-day itinerary. But if you're new, I encourage you to just stick with me for a couple of minutes while I tell you a little bit about what Wheel and Anchor is all about. So let's get started. We are more than just another travel company. In fact, we are a community of like minded travelers from all across Canada. And the important thing, the essence of who we are, is all about like minded people coming together, enjoying experiences to some fascinating places around the world, doing it at a bit of a slower pace. Camaraderie is really the essence of what Wheel and Anchor is all about. But of course, this is about travel. And in that vein, we have two main goals for our members: to be well traveled and well connected. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, I'm already well traveled. I've been to a whole bunch of different countries. But when we say well traveled, we don't mean just ticking off destinations off a bucket list, which, let's face it, travelers, we all have a bucket list. I certainly have one. I can tell you exactly how many countries I've been to. But what we're talking about is maintaining the ability to stay curious, stay adventurous, and being open to shifting your perspective as we explore new places around the world. This is how travel has the power to change us as individuals and change how we see the world. Being well connected is also super important for us. This is about forging friendships that last long after the trip ends. It's about building a community of fellow travel enthusiasts who share stories, tips, dreams, and they often get together after the trip is over. That is an important part of the essence of what Wheel and Anchor is all about. Now, before we get into all the details, I want to just say one thing about who we are, who is Wheel and Anchor, because, of course, it's the team behind all of this that is critical. First of all, my name is Gordon Dreger. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I am the curator of all of the trips that we have on offer here. And I've been doing this for 35 years, organizing trips for Canadians to all parts of the globe. But, of course, we have a lofty mission here: being well traveled, being well connected. And so, in order to pull that off, I need a dedicated team, and I have that. Amazing people who are as passionate about travel and about creating experiences that are really unique. And different, and fulfill on these promises. Now, I'm not going to introduce all of them, but the person that is most important for you is our lead trip specialist, Paula Zarnik. She is the one who, when you first email us, unless you've already been in touch with us, and you will have spoken to Paula undoubtedly before, but as soon as you get in touch with us, you'll be speaking to Paula, and she is the one who can answer all of your questions. And if she can't find the answer, she'll talk to one of our colleagues, and we'll get the answer for you to make sure that you have everything that you need to know if you decide to join us on this or any one of our trips. So, what we're going to do on this webinar is pretty simple and straightforward. I'm going to be your virtual guide. I'm going to take you on a little journey around this trip and what you can expect from this experiential type trip. We're going to start off with a geographical overview. I'll show you a map just to orient you, and then we'll cover the highlights of each day of our journey. Our main trip is 2 weeks in duration, 13 nights to be precise, and begins in Buenos Aires and finishes in Santiago. But for those that are interested, we have added on a few extra days at the beginning to visit Iguazu Falls. Now, let's take a look at the map. If you look at the inset here, you'll see what we're talking about. Iguazu Falls is right up here in the northeastern part of the country. In fact, it straddles the border with Brazil. The Iguazu River cuts right in between, and you have all these waterfalls. We'll start there for 3 nights. You can get to Iguazu Falls by taking a flight, depending where you're coming in from in Canada, to a major hub like Toronto, fly down to Sao Paulo, catch a connector right into Iguazu. We'll visit both the Brazilian and Argentinian side of the falls. Then we're going to head down to Buenos Aires by flight. Of course, it's Buenos Aires, of course, more a little bit further to the south on the Rio de la Plata. That's this river here, which looks more like a big bay. We'll spend 5 nights in Buenos Aires visiting the city. We'll also get to see Uruguay, a little piece of it. We'll see Colonia del Sacramento. It's a beautiful city on the other side of the Rio de la Plata. And from there, we fly across the country to Mendoza, which, of course, is on the western side of Argentina and the foothills of the Andes Mountains. We'll spend 4 nights exploring this beautiful city that most people haven't heard much about. I'm going to share, obviously, about that in a minute. We'll then cross over the Andes Mountains by car. It's a long day, but it's truly amazing from a vista standpoint. We'll then be in Santiago de Chile, the capital, of course, of Chile, and we will visit that city as well as the coastal cities of Valparaiso and Viña del Mar before wrapping up in Santiago. So let's start off with some words about Iguazu Falls, our pre-trip. And if you're not interested in that, you want to skip ahead, you can just jump down, look at the chapters in the description. You can jump ahead to the main trip itinerary. Getting to Iguazu Falls, you're either going to arrive in at Foz de Iguazu, which is on the Brazilian side of the falls. It's a city in Brazil, or in Puerto Iguazu, which is on the Argentinian side of the falls. Now, of course, you're going to be wondering, okay, which one do I choose? It's really going to depend on how you will fly from Canada, and one of my colleagues will help you decide and figure that out. But either way, we're going to be staying in Puerto Iguazu on the Argentinian side of the falls, and it's not a long drive. There's some border crossing formalities if you do come in through Brazil. You're going to be immediately taken by the size, the grandeur of these waterfalls, particularly if you arrive in Brazil and cross over to our hotel in Argentina. On the first day, because obviously it is a bit of a long journey, nice thing is it's almost the same time zone, depending, of course, where you're originating from. So you won't have the jet lag, but it will have been a long flight. So we'll kind of take it easy. You'll have a chance to enjoy, relax in the hotel, maybe wander into town of Puerto Iguazu before we get going with our exploration of both sides of the falls. So, on our first full day, we're going to do an exploration of the Brazilian side of Iguazu Falls. We'll have a nice breakfast and head back across the border, particularly if we just arrived into Brazil on the previous day. The Brazilian side of Iguazu Falls is located within what's called Parque Nacional de Iguazu, which was established back in 1939. And it's actually 3 times larger than the park that's on the Argentinian side. Now, you're going to hear a lot of debate when you're there as to which side of the falls has the better views. I can give you my opinion, but I think it's best if you just go on the trip and decide for yourself. We're going to walk along the cliffs of the Iguazu River. We'll have beautiful views of the so-called Bossetti and Three Musketeers Falls, but the highlight will be the observation deck at Devil's Throat. And you're going to hear a lot about Devil's Throat from when you're there. We're going to see it from both sides, but this is like the center point, the heart of the whole main part of the waterfall. This is the most powerful cascade, the roar of the water, the mist rising up. It's absolutely amazing. So we'll spend a good chunk of the day and head back. You'll have some free time in the afternoon. On the next day, we're going to stay on the Argentinian side of the falls. And what makes this side quite special is the fact that there are over 275 cascades here. Our main highlight of the day will be heading to see the Devil's Throat itself. And on the Argentinian side, there's this long walkway. First, you take a train, and then there's a long walkway that will take you to the middle of the falls. And it's almost looks perilous from some of the pictures, but obviously it's completely safe. From time to time, they do close it. When I was last there, I was a little bit unlucky, but I can tell you the views from the falls there's so many amazing perspectives. This is why I think Iguazu is the most incredibly worthwhile waterfall to visit in the world. People will talk about the difference between the Argentine side and the Brazilian side and why it's so important to visit both. Um, what they say about the Argentinian side is that it's more immersive. You'll get so close to the waterfalls that you'll be encouraged to wear like a poncho, a waterproof covering, and waterproof boots because you're almost certainly going to get soaking wet. On the Brazilian side, it's more panoramic. So you get this wide angle view of the falls. There's a spot where the birds fly right through the waterfalls because they make their nests in behind. And you can see by the smiling faces of members from one of our past trips, this is truly an amazing experience. Now, keep in mind as well that Iguazu Falls, being in the north part of Argentina, is tropical. So the weather is warm. You can be out in t-shirts and summer wear and really enjoy this amazing climate and these amazing waterfalls. After a couple of spectacular days in Iguazu Falls, it'll be time to head to the airport for your short domestic flight down to Buenos Aires. So this is where the main trip begins here, and those who joined us on our pre-trip to Iguazu will join together with those who are arriving in for the main part of our Crossing the Andes trip after their arrival in Buenos Aires. For those joining us for the main trip in Buenos Aires, the first question is, how do you get there? Well, there are a number of different options, the most obvious being to connect through Toronto, which offers a regular service to Buenos Aires, sometimes making a stop in Sao Paulo. But there are a number of other ways to get there, particularly if you want to avoid stopping in the US, which of course involves going through immigration and all that stuff. There are gateways like Panama City, Bogota in Colombia, Sao Paulo again itself, or even Santiago de Chile. So the best thing is to talk to either one of our team members or a travel agency to find out what's the best flight connection for you. As you fly in, you're going to realize the expanse of this massive city of 10 million people. We're going to be staying right downtown in the area called Palermo. Buenos Aires is broken up into a whole bunch of different and fascinating neighborhoods. We're staying, as I say, quite close to the very center of the city in a leafy area with some, lively restaurants and bars. It's a great place to stay. I've been there a number of times myself, and I quite enjoy this neighborhood. And we don't plan a lot for the arrival day. Depending on exactly your flight connection, you may arrive early in the morning or midday, but there'll be time to wander around, stretch your legs, and enjoy this city. We'll get right into it on the next day with pretty much a full day tour that is going to be mostly on foot. We'll start off with some of the highlights that really form part of the cultural fabric of the city. Plaza de Mayo, which is the political heart, that's where you'll find Casa Rosada, the presidential palace. Rosada meaning pink, of course, in Spanish. And this is quite a notorious square in front of it because it's obviously been the heart or the backdrop of some of the most defining moments in the history of the country. A lot to see and learn about at Plaza de Mayo. Then we'll head over to nearby San Telmo. This is the birthplace of tango, cobblestone streets. You'll almost feel like you're in Europe here, but of course you'll hear from time to time that sound of tango music emanating from the various studios in the neighborhood. Off to La Boca, where you'll see all kinds of beautifully, brightly painted houses in the area of El Caminito. This is known to be, or traditionally, a poorer district of town, very safe, of course, but this is where we find the immigrant roots of the city. It's really an amazing slice of history. And then we'll head back to the neighborhood of Recoleta, which is basically adjacent to where we're staying in Palermo. This the big highlight here, of course, is the Recoleta Cemetery, which is it's like a city in and of itself, mausoleums, statues, where many of Argentina's most influential figures are buried. The most famous of which, Eva Perón, otherwise known as Evita, and her whole story and that of the Peronist movement continues to spark debate and fascination to up to this day. No sooner that we have arrived in Argentina and we're going to be taking in a different country on this day. We'll set off from the port of Buenos Aires and take a high speed ferry across the Rio de la Plata, which again almost looks like a brown ocean because you can't see Uruguay on the other side. We'll be heading to Colonia del Sacramento, which is the oldest city in the country. Once we get there, we're going to look around the Barrio Histórico, this historic center of Colonia, and it's a designated World Heritage Site. Cobblestone streets, colonial era buildings. It's really has a wonderful blend of Portuguese, Spanish influences. Walking through and around Colonia feels like stepping back in town. It's got whitewashed houses, colorful doors, and of course vintage cars as well, which really give it a very old world atmosphere. So we'll get a little bit of an introduction about Uruguay, about Colonia. You'll have lots of time to explore in the afternoon before we take the ferry back to Buenos Aires. We'll then have pretty much a full day to explore the city on our own. We purposely include free days on most of our trips because it's important for us and for our members to go out and venture around a little bit on their own. And Buenos Aires is really a wonderful city to just stroll around and get lost, if you will. There's so many interesting places to visit and cafes to sit in, or walking down Avenida Santa Fe, which is one of my favorite shopping streets. If you haven't already figured out what to do, your host, your guide, will give you some advice. But we always suggest it's best to do a little research to find out all of the exciting things that you may want to discover in your own time. That evening, though, we'll head over to San Telmo again, that we made a brief stop in on our first day. This atmospheric neighborhood with its cobblestone streets and historic buildings is where the tango dance first emerged back in the end of the 19th century. It was started off with a mix of European immigrants combining African rhythms and other local influences to create this very unique style of music. We'll see one of the country's famous tango shows with a dinner. This is performed in the style of the classic 1940s orchestras, with the music, the movement, and all the emotion that goes along with it. This is really an evening to be remembered. We're going to spend a full day heading up to the Paraná Delta and the town of Tigre, which most visitors miss. Why we've spending the time here that we do, because this is one of my favorite stops in the city. And we'll begin in San Isidro, which is one of the more elegant and historic suburbs, about 30 minutes north of the city. We'll head along the Rio del Plata, look at the beautiful colonial architecture and tree-lined streets, and the gorgeous homes that they have in that neighborhood. They also have a beautiful neo-Gothic cathedral that dominates the skyline. And then we'll head into Tigre itself, and we'll venture out on a boat, through for a scenic cruise around this Paraná Delta. And this is sort of like the cottage area for a lot of porteños. Porteños are the residents of Buenos Aires. There's a whole network of islands and canals, and it's really an otherworldly setting when you compare it to the vibrant busyness of Buenos Aires itself. Many of the houses sit on stilts, and boats are the main way to get around. So it's a unique place to visit, and we'll certainly have a fun day out. We'll then head off to Newbury, first by starting from the domestic airport in Buenos Aires, George Newbury, which is right downtown. Mendoza, of course, as you may already know, and as I mentioned, is really the heart of the Argentinian wine business. It sits in the foothills of the Andes Mountains. It's renowned for its high altitude vineyards and for its beautiful streets. It's an amazing city in and of itself. We'll just have time to settle in and wander around. Again, a very safe spot. We'll have dinner at a local restaurant that's going to feature some local wines, many of which you won't have tasted before. You'll definitely see labels that you'll recognize from liquor store shelves back home, but undoubtedly you're going to want to sip a glass of Malbec, which is the grape that Argentina is perhaps most famous for. We'll spend our first day exploring a bit of the city itself. Most people don't know much about Mendoza, other than, of course, that it's a wine city, but there really is a lot to see. And this is one of those spots that the feedback we generally get is, oh, if we'd only known how beautiful the city was, we might have planned to come here on a previous trip. We're going to start off at Plaza Independencia, which is the largest and most important square of the city. It was designed as part of the post earthquake reconstruction, and it's surrounded by beautiful poplar and sycamore trees that provide shade from the sun. It's a lively spot, the square often filled with performers and artists and local vendors. We'll then head over and visit General San Martin Park, which is the crown jewel of parks in the city. It's one of the largest urban parks in the whole country. It was originally designed by a French landscape architect and has over 300 different species of trees and plants. We'll then head over to Cerro de la Gloria, which is a hill that offers panoramic views of Mendoza and the Andes Mountains. And again, the vistas here are really awesome. You can see the monument to General San Martin, who was the leader of the independence movement of Argentina. There'll be time in the afternoon to explore some local markets. Great place to get some handmade crafts, and they really do have some nice markets in Mendoza. Or you might want to just kick back and enjoy another glass of that Malbec wine. Today will be a private cooking class in Mendoza, and this is again highlight. We often think about Argentina as steak. There's a lot more to their culinary palate, though, than that. Our cooking class is going to be at a beautiful local winery, and we're going to learn how to prepare some traditional Argentine dishes using ingredients that come right out of their organic garden. We'll first walk around the garden. We'll collect some seasonal fruits and vegetables that we'll be using and looking out over the mountains. Again, it's really the whole experience is quite idyllic. We're going to start off with some of the staples of Argentinian cuisine. We'll learn about empanadas. Those are those half moon shaped pastries made out of dough and stuffed with all kinds of different delicious stuff like meat or cheese or vegetables. We'll then learn about humitas, which is this sweet and savory dish made from corn, wrapped in husks and steamed. Oh, so delicious. We'll also learn about the art of ember roasting, which is a very important technique in Argentinian cuisine. The chef will show us how to roast the vegetables and meats over an open flame, which brings out these rich, smoky flavors that pair so well with the wines. After all that, we'll sit down to a meal that we will have prepared all by ourselves, obviously with the help of the local chef, and again, enjoy another glass of Malbec or perhaps one of the other varietals from the region. And we'll head back in time for a relaxing afternoon, maybe a nap or to explore a little bit more of town. On this day, we get out and explore a little bit of the countryside where some of these famous Argentinian wines come from. Our focus today is going to be the renowned region of Luján de Cuyo, which is known as the birthplace of Malbec, and it's home to some of the most prestigious wineries in Mendoza. They have a very interesting and ingenious irrigation system that was first developed by the indigenous Huarpe people, and it was expanded on by the Spanish settlers. So we'll learn a little bit about how that was so important in turning the desert landscape into a fertile hub for winemaking. We'll visit a couple of the top wineries in the region. We'll, of course, try some delicious Malbecs. If you weren't already a fan, you will get a completely new perspective on it. But we'll also try some Cabernet Sauvignon, and there'll be other delicious things to try for those who are not wine lovers. And we'll learn, most importantly, how the high altitude of the region with the intense sunlight and the cool nights creates this perfect balance of bold flavors and crisp acidity that the Argentinian wines are so well known for. But the area is also famous for olive oil, with producers like Olicola Lor ranked among the best in the world. We're going to visit one of these top producers to learn about the olive oil making process in Argentina and sample some of their award winning oils. What's in store for us today is when we head out of Mendoza, we're going for the drive of a lifetime. We begin by passing through the vineyards that surround Mendoza before heading into the foothills of the Andes. And the landscape will gradually shift from the green oases of cypress and sycamore trees to more rugged, rocky terrain as we ascend up to the Los Libertadores Pass, which is at 3,200 meters above sea level, or just over 10,000 feet. There'll be snow-capped peaks on both sides with waterfalls cascading down. Again, the mountain scenery here is truly spectacular. We pass through the Los Libertadores Tunnel, which cuts under the Andes and connects Argentina and Chile. The On the Argentina side, the road is it's a fairly gentle ascent, but when we get out of the tunnel on the Chilean side, it is switchback after switchback, a very dramatic and breathtaking descent on one of the most winding mountain roads in the world. It's here that we'll have a chance to look up to Mount Aconcagua, the highest peak in the Americas, as we head down into the Aconcagua Valley. We'll take some lunch with us along the way. It's going to be a pretty much a full day journey, perhaps as much as 8 hours, depending on how long we spend at customs. We'll arrive in the late afternoon at our hotel in Santiago and have a chance to settle in, freshen up, and stretch our legs by wandering around town. We'll spend our first full day in Chile exploring Santiago. Again, a city that not many people know much about, but we're certainly going to fill you in on why it's such a fascinating place to visit. One of the things that makes the city unique is that it's one of the few places in the world where you could actually ski in the Andes in the morning and be surfing the Pacific coast not far away that same day. The skyline features some sleek skyscrapers like the Gran Torre Santiago, which is actually the tallest building in South America at 300 meters high. All next to colonial gems like the 16th century San Francisco Church. They've also got a 15 million-year-old volcanic hill, Cerro Santa Lucia, in the middle of the city, which is where it was founded back in the 16th century. The Metropolitan Park is another gem in the city. It's twice the size of Central Park in New York and has incredible panoramic views from atop the Cerro San Cristobal, which is crowned by a towering Virgin Mary statue. For those of you who've been to Rio de Janeiro, it is a little bit reminiscent of that. A third of the population of the country resides here in Santiago, which means that there's quite a bustling and yet welcoming atmosphere. We're going to start off visiting the historic heart of the city, so-called Santiago Centro. Here is the political, cultural, and economic heart, not just of the city, but of the whole country. You'll see again this blend of iconic skyscrapers with some very colonial era 19th century buildings. We'll start off at Plaza de Armas, which is the main square and the historic and social heart of the city. It's flanked by the Metropolitan Cathedral and the National Historical Museum, and it's where the city was founded back in 1541. The square is typically lively with performers and vendors and all kinds of activities. It's a great place to witness the pulse of the city. We'll then visit the La Moneda Palace, which is the seat of the Chilean government and is a neoclassical building that was built in the early part of the 19th century and is one of the most important political landmarks in the whole country. It's not only architecturally interesting, but it's also a symbol of the complex political history, including the 1973 coup, which some of us will remember, that really shifted the course of history for Chile. We'll then head over to visit Mercado Central. As a foodie, it's one of my favorite spots. This is the food market, and it's a lively hub for locals, visitors, and built again at the latter part of the 19th century, featuring this unique steel construction or iron construction. And there's all kinds of seafood vendors, butchers, and produce stalls, and so on. It's a great spot to try some of the fresh seafood that comes in from the coast, particularly centola, which is king crab, and ceviche. And many of you will maybe know ceviche from Peru. The Chileans and the Peruvians are always rivals for who has the best ceviche. The next day, we'll head out to the coast to visit two of Chile's most beautiful cities. We'll start off by driving through the wine region of the Casablanca Valley, which is one of the premier wine regions of the country. The cool climate and dramatic temperature swings create amazing conditions for growing Chardonnays and Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir. So we'll stop at a little vineyard, we'll sample some of the standout varietals from the region, and take in the beautiful countryside. We'll then head over to Viña del Mar, which is also known as Ciudad Jardín, or Garden City, because of its lush parks and its beautifully maintained gardens. The whole city has a kind of a refined seaside elegance that's a bit reminiscent of someplace along the French Riviera, for example. There's wide avenues, historic mansions, and kind of a relaxed coastal atmosphere. We'll have a chance to do a bit of a stroll along the beachfront promenade, and maybe explore some of the city's gardens or outdoor sculptures. We then head over to Valparaiso, which is a city that is as artistic as it is historic. I mean, it's an important commercial port, but what it's really known for is its steep hills and its maze of tangled streets, and its ascensores, which have earned it a place as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The ascensores, which are the funiculars, have been in operation since the latter part of the 19th century, and they offer not only a convenient way to get from the lower part of the city to the upper part. You've got some great views of the harbor, and they are quite a historic site in and of themselves. The city has been a magnet for creative minds for a long, long time. Poets, painters, musicians have all come here and been inspired by the chaotic charm of the city, and you'll see this in some of the striking murals and graffiti that adorn the city's walls. So this will be a great day out exploring some very interesting parts of the country, and we'll be back in Santiago by early evening. Our last full day of our trip will be dedicated to a free day, which is a great time to get out and explore some of the amazing things that Santiago has to offer. Again, I always encourage our members to do a little bit of digging on their own of the types of things that might interest them. If you're somebody that's into artisan works and crafts and so on, there's a great spot called Pueblito Los Dominicos, which is in the Las Condes district of town. This is the spot if you want to pick up some local crafts. There's like 150 stalls featuring ceramics and textiles and jewelry and so on. If you're more of a history buff, you can take a dive into the ancient past of the country by heading to the Museo Chileno de Arte Precolombino, which is a pre-Columbian museum with artifacts from all over the Americas. There's a whole textile section, there's ancient tools, pottery. This really gives you a bit of a deeper insight into the settlement of the whole continent. Of course, you could head back to Mercado Central. That's probably what I would do to sample some more delicious things, because you probably will not had enough on your first visit there. But there's a number of other things that you could do. Pablo Neruda, the famous Chilean poet, had a home here. You can visit it. It's called La Chascona in the neighborhood of Bella Vista. I love Bella Vista as a great place to stroll around, cafes, shops. This is definitely worth spending a few hours of the day. But there's also a great cultural center called Gabriela Mistral, which is dedicated to the performing arts of the country. The Museum of Human Rights is a very important one because it talks about all of the human rights violations that happened during the military dictatorship that, again, we may remember from the 60s and early 70s. Regardless, you'll find something that appeals to you. And that evening, we'll gather together at one of the top restaurants of the city to have our farewell dinner and share some of the stories and memories of a trip that will undoubtedly have been very memorable. Time to say goodbye. Our private transfer will, of course, pick you up at the hotel and bring you back to the airport. Perhaps you'll continue on for another adventure. I know that on past trips, members have organized for themselves a visit out to Easter Island, which is, of course, a 5-hour flight from Santiago to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's the Atacama Desert. There's so many other things that you could do in Chile, but one way or the other, we'll be parting ways and you'll be headed for your onward journey. Hopefully, you've gotten some inspiration about what Argentina and Chile have to offer. There's so much to see in these two countries, and I think we've covered really some of the highlights. If anything, by coming along, you may want to make yet another visit to explore more of these amazing countries. You can get details about this trip by visiting our webpage, and you'll find the link to it in the description box just below this video on YouTube. There you can also download our detailed trip itinerary, which is a full color e-brochure with everything I've talked about today, and then some, also the pricing and the inclusions and so on. And finally, we have a trip specific reference guide that is sort of like our FAQ that will give you lots more information on the logistics of traveling to Argentina and Chile. Regardless, you may still have questions, and of course, we're happy to answer those. If you drop us an email or give us a call, Paula will be there to answer any questions about this or any of our trips. Thank you so much for joining me on this virtual journey through Argentina and Chile. I hope it gives you a bit of a glimpse of what you can expect. Our trips are designed to give you more than just a typical tour. They're all about experiencing a destination as if you were like a temporary local. We've carefully put together all these excursions and the places that we dine at. We've given you plenty of free time. So it really is a great way to experience these two countries. If you enjoy following our webinars on new trips, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. You just click on that subscribe button just below, and that way you'll be alerted whenever we release a new webinar. Thanks again for taking the time to explore this part of the world with me. And if you're not already on our newsletter list, I invite you to join our community, and perhaps we'll see you at either one of our social events in Canada that happen each summer or on one of our trips. We'd love to have you along. Take care. In the meantime, happy travels.